Hello, my friend. Welcome to another episode of the DMD podcast. My name's Cam Hall. I'm your host, and we're doing something a little different this week. Last spring, back in May, I had the opportunity to guest on the Essential 11. That's Matt Boudreau's podcast. And Matt brought me in to speak to his mastermind group, to answer questions, and to have a conversation about building character, building integrity, and identity through action and service. And sometimes I find that when I get on here as a solo episode, it's really hard. Like it's really hard to have a conversation with yourself. And sometimes it takes others to bring the best out of you. And I have to say that this conversation I had with Matt on his podcast was one of my favorites that I've had this year. I get to connect with so many men. I've been on, I think, 30 podcasts this year, but this interview was so fun. But Matt brought the best out of me. He let me speak, he let me share. I got into parts of my life that I haven't shared before. I got to answer questions of the young men in his group, and I really enjoyed it. And when I was thinking about an episode for this week, as we are back into the swing of things, I just thought back to this is so timely. I think guys who are new to the Dads Making a Difference podcast, guys who are new to my community, to this community, to our community, need to hear my story, but hear it through a way where I'm pushed by someone else asking me questions. And so this week we're running it back. We are going to run back my interview on Essential 11 with Matt Boudreau. It's going to be a good one. And just so you know, I get a little bit emotional. He challenges me a little bit, and it's fantastic. And I appreciate every minute of it. So dive in to this episode of the Dads Making a Difference podcast, which is really my conversation with Matt, finding purpose, navigating life's challenges, building character, integrity, and identity through action, right now on the DMD podcast.
So good to have you, man. So good to be able to hang out and get to chat and bring you in. And we want to talk all things Cam Hall today. We're going to talk about your story. However, we want to unpackage that, going from Cam as a young guy to Cam, what he's doing now. And I can tell you now that you're a leader now that I'm honored to know. I'm excited to continue to get to know better. I'm really, really grateful that we have, our paths have crossed and we started to develop a relationship, man. So I'm excited to introduce you to the community and to all the people that listen to this around the world too, man. So thanks for joining us, truly.
And I appreciate you. And I just want to say how amazing it is to be here and how grateful I am for the invite. You're doing amazing work, and this is awesome, brother. So thank you.
Grateful, brother. Grateful. Yeah, it's so fun, man. I look for, like, Fridays, I jump up. I never know what day it is right when I wake up. Like, it's all because they all run together and I always have something going down. But I wake up and I was like, Friday, sweet. I know I love Fridays because I get to do it with this crew. And I'm like, today, Cam, sweet. So yeah, it's a solid day, man. So take us back, man. Where were you in the world at, 11, 12, 13? What's life looking like for you? Who is this young guy?
Yeah. Where in the world am I think is some of the questions that some of the people listening to me right now might have, because apparently I talk a little funny, but I live in Canada. I live in a city 1 hour north of the Montana border. For the Americans, that's my reference point. 2 hours directly north of Great Falls, Montana. I live in a city called Lethbridge, but I didn't grow up here. I was born in a city called Calgary, which is about an hour from Banff, Alberta. A lot of people know that because it's a very touristy, Rocky Mountains, beautiful place. Live there, and you mentioned 11 or 12 years old, and actually at 11 and 12, my family made a move. We were living in Calgary. My mom wasn't working. She was a day home provider. My dad worked in construction. My dad still works in construction. How old am I? Yeah, he's gonna be 65 this year and still working in construction. And so we lived in this small house in Calgary, and everybody on our street, well, everybody on our street had their houses broken into several times in a couple months. And my parents always struggled for money. We were living in a low income place. I didn't know this, by the way, Matt. These are things that we learn when we're men, when our parents share things with us. But we struggled for money. So I remember driving around in a car in the city with my mom driving, me and my two brothers in the back seat. I would have been about, yeah, 11 or 10 or 11 years old. And there was no rear end on the car. Like there was no trunk on this four-door car because my dad had taken it off to do some body work on it. Here we're driving around. It's like, this is how we rolled. And when I was 12 years old, actually, it was 1 week before my 12th birthday, we moved to a small town. And when I say small town, I mean Calgary is a city about 1.6, 1.8 million people. Small town is we actually moved to an acreage in the middle of nowhere, 25 minutes outside of a town of 3,000 people. And so
Wow.
that's where I was going to go to school. And so I went from living on the main strip of a freeway where we would walk out our front lawn, walk up the grass knoll, and then you look down, there's a freeway to the middle of nowhere. And all I could see was field and the mountains in the background. Beautiful, but traumatizing for a 12-year-old boy who had his friends and his sights hope and his hope set on football and sports and
Yeah.
starting over. And I remember walking into school that first day, grade six, and 1 week before my 12th birthday, and I was clearly the city kid. Like there was belt buckles, Wrangler
Yeah.
jeans, cowboy boots, and I walked in. And Matt, you would remember this because it was back the Mondetta T-shirt with the
Oh
blue
yeah.
jeans, and it was a shirt that I bought at a thrift store the week before, and jeans that had a chew tin ring in the back. I was 11 years old. I wasn't chewing tobacco, but
Yeah.
because I had grown so fast, my mom had to buy my jeans at a thrift store too. So we were like all secondhand everything. I didn't quite fit in. And so as a young man, I didn't really fit into my community. So I spent a lot of time with my brothers. I spent a lot of time shooting things. I spent a lot of time learning how to drive through a hayfield. And that's kind of where I spent most of my teenage years until I got into sport. And when I got into sport, I found something I could connect with. And so we ended up moving into town about 2 years later, into town, 25 minutes in. And I lived really close to the school. And one thing I loved doing was mountain biking. So, an area that we live, we're 60 minutes from the Rocky Mountains. And since I've been a kid, I just love to mountain bike, like race amateur, do hard things. I've got scars all over my body from terrible decisions I've made on routes I've tried to take. And it's been amazing. But as a kid, this was my solace. It was like my thing to do. So my grandparents lived just outside of Banff, Alberta, in a place called Canmore, Alberta. And I would spend as much time as I could there in the mountains. It was like my happy place as a kid. It's where I grounded. It's where I felt good. And I didn't have many friends until I started playing sports. Because then people start to see, like, I wasn't 6'5" when I was 12 years old. I
Yeah.
was actually 5'9" when I was 14. And
Sweet.
by the time I turned 16, I was 6'5". And
Really.
so that was a quick little turnaround. But we lived in a small town. And like I said, my mom was stayed at home. She ended up getting a job as a waitress in a cafe in the small town. So my mom split shifts between the opening coffee run at the restaurant in the morning, at the cafe in the morning. Then she worked at the post office for a couple hours in the afternoon. She would go back and do the dinner rush, which left my dad still working in Calgary, an hour and 15 minutes away. So he would drive in and out every day. So I never saw dad. He would be up. He worked hard for our family. I love my dad. Had a good relationship with my dad, but very different than I have with my kids now.
Mm.
And so he was up. I hear his diesel truck fire up in the morning. He was out like 5 a.m. I get up, I go to school, feed my brothers because my mom's working the dinner rush at the restaurant. So I would come home and I would feed my brothers and then I'd head off to practice because at this point I'm heading into high school and playing sports. And that's how it was, Matt, until I was about 18 years old when things started to really come together and I started to get offers to go play post-secondary sport.
Mm.
Hey, in Canada, volleyball is big. Hey, do you want to come play university college volleyball? You have an opportunity to play university college basketball. And this was for me. I was going to go work the rigs, man. That's what I wanted to do. Everybody in my class, all my buddies in town, were going to work the oil rigs. We're going to make big money. And that's what we're going to do. I was so excited for that.
You're a roughneck.
Yeah, man. Yeah, roughneck being just everybody's dog, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
that's really what it is. And so that's what I wanted to do until a coach came to me and he said, here's a path that I see you're going down. These are the things your friends are doing. These are the things that I see you getting sucked into. You have this opportunity to get out of this town of 2,500 to 3,000 people, follow a path into a post-secondary education that you don't really want to take, but you love sport and you need a community that surrounds you. And that's a power of this, right? That's a power of community and people who are going to surround you and speak into your life. And teammates do that, coaches do that. And I've been a product of coaches my entire life since then. So I made the decision as a 17-year-old to sign my declaration letter. I was going to go play college basketball. So I dove into that. And then life took an interesting spin. after that. But I can pause right there if you want,
Cool.
or I can.
Oh, that's perfect. So I think that's and this is the beauty of, hey, by the way, Cam is an amazing host as well. He's got a fantastic podcast, and I get, the luxury and the honor of doing multiple podcasts, usually as guests every week. And then sometimes you're like, ooh, that one was really good. That host is really good. Cam's is like absolutely like that. He does a phenomenal job on that. So perfect cliffhanger on that too. And I want to get into that interesting spin, but I want to unpack a couple of things in here so far. This is great, man. You're moving at this pivotal time, right? So you're growing
Yeah.
up out there, you're
Yeah.
in Calgary, and then you're moving over to we're going to go ahead and call it North Montana. That's a new
It was
state. I'm
so
just,
the town was actually called Three Hills, because
okay.
there were I was out in the middle of nowhere, it's the prairies, right? It's farmland. You can see the mountains in the distance, but it's farmland. And there's three quote unquote hills. You would see these and you'd be like, those aren't hills, those are bumps in the
Yeah,
field.
those
But
are both.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's what it was
yeah.
called.
Those are mountain biking bumps. So you're in this time, like 12 is a funky time because, as you know, I mean,
Yeah.
there's the social emotional, there's the big brain development jump. There's so many things that hit you at 12, 13, right? That you're like,
Yeah.
they just hit you and your world just goes, and you have no idea that it's even happening. You don't even get it until you get done and you look back and you're like, oh, okay, cool, man. Now I see what happened there, right? So you're in
Right.
this. You mentioned the solace of the individual during that
Mm,
growth period, the solace of the individual, getting out on the mountain bike and having like some peace and some solitude there. And you
yeah.
also mentioned the power of sport to connect. In both ways, you've got these physical things that one is this individual solace, and then one is this now I'm connecting with other people in
Right.
that time, especially with all of the changes that were going on for you, if you had to pick, I know the answer is yes, and it's both.
It is. Yeah.
I know it's both,
Yeah.
but the Socratic educator in me is gonna push at you a little bit. If
Yeah.
you had to pick, was the thing that helped most the sport that allowed you to connect and make a connection when you didn't automatically just fit in? You were the obvious city kid, right? The
Yeah.
sport and the connection there, or the ability to go find yourself in the solace of, out there on the mountains. If you had to pick one, which one was more impactful?
Truthfully, as a young man, it would be sport.
Yeah.
I think hindsight as a grown man, I know the solace is important to me now as I'm old and boring. But sport was it,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
brotherhood. Yeah.
Yeah. I think is that because it is still even as us in our 40s, right? It's still a yes and there is still the
Yes.
need to have the individual and our time to think, and then we also have the
Yeah.
need of brotherhood, right? Like we need it both. And do you think there is a life stage thing where both is always important, but it's various life stages maybe that point us towards one is a little more beneficial or impactful than the other?
Um, yes, for life stages, but here's why sport's important. And here's why it doesn't have to be sport. Okay. Like, not everybody's into sport. Some
Sure.
people are into adventure. Some people are into like solos and doing something together that's maybe not as physical or high intensity, whatever it is, that's fine. But that part of community, you know what it did for me? Was as a young man who grew up in a small town where I never really fit in. And I
Yeah.
felt like I was always chasing friendships or chasing groups to belong to, which goes into my later part of my
Sure.
story, was this piece that I had something to bring. Like, I showed up and I knew I could bring something to that group. And when I could display my ability, they were like, whoa, yeah, like,
Yeah.
dang, like, let's do this. Like, you're in, you do this. And it wasn't, it was a forced connection. Here's 14 guys that you're going to
Right.
go play ball with. But at the same time, it was like this equal appreciation for each other, that we all brought something unique. And that had a greater goal that we had together, and we all brought our little insights to it. That
Yeah.
was awesome. It's still great. Like, I still love being part of things like that. But
Yeah.
yes, life stages, I think we get into our 40s, we get a little bit older, and then we get so caught up in that side of it. I
Yeah.
can bring so much of myself to other things. I can bring myself to the group. I can speak into this group. I can speak into that group, run a podcast, whatever it is, that you don't take time for yourself. And so those times where I was forced to be in solos when I was young, I'd probably look at those and be like, that really sucked, you know? But now my wife will look at me and say, you need to get your truck, throw your bike on the back, get the tent and go,
Oh,
because she can see it in me.
yeah.
And I do that. And she literally does that. I did that 2 weekends ago.
Yeah.
Big decision in my life. She's like, you need to go. Like just take the axe, some wood, a tent, your bike, and go.
And
So I
just
did. Yeah.
that's all. Oh, I love it, man. And I love what you said the forced experience, right? The shared experience there that is kind of forced through the nature of where you were. And a
Mhm.
couple of years ago, I was in Mexico with a handful of guys, and one of the guys that was there was a gentleman named Stephen Mansfield, who's come in with us. And Stephen wrote Mansfield's book on manly men, and he's this
Mhm.
brilliant thinker, author, speaker, writer, just a brilliant human. And he was kind of this father figure to all of us while we were down there in Mexico. We didn't even know that we were looking for that while we were there, but he very much came to be that. Another guy who was in the room who could not be more different than Stephen, but we all came together around this, Jack Donovan, author of The Way of Men, right? And so Jack
Mhm.
is somebody that is such a unique individual. He's come in with us a couple of times, become a friend. He's a brilliant human, so different on the spectrum from Steven, right? But the two things that they came together around that was so powerful that speaks to what you're saying there. Steven was talking about how men need a band of brothers,
Mhm.
and young men or men, we need a band of brothers, and how women will do a great job a lot of times of doing this face to face, and
Yeah.
men are like, let's do this shoulder to shoulder and let's go conquer something, right? And
Yeah.
then Jack does a really good job of describing, cool, as they're going to conquer, you find guys that fill these roles. And so it's like you could be the funny guy or the athletic guy or the guy that's like, you find these roles. It's so interesting watching that play out, right? So
Yeah.
you've got this, you've found the connection through this role, but now you've got somebody too that's like, hey, you're connected with these guys, but I see something more for you.
Mhm.
Right. And so he's kind of now like, hey, I'm going to pull you out of this band of brothers just a little bit because I see you going down a path. Now you've got, so life then takes this interesting twist. So
Yeah.
take it to that point.
Yeah, and it speaks to the group mentality as well. And I'm looking around this and I see young men in their bedrooms. I see guys at work, guys who are driving, because
Yeah.
we do things on our own. Like, I think as men, we're driven to like conquer a little bit and we want to do that on our own, but we realize that at the end of the day, we can't do it on our own. And
Yeah.
it's a little bit humbling. And so we have to be a bit vulnerable and reach out and be part of a bigger group. And I think sport played that for me. It was like always that anticipation of, well, I got to try out and I got to make this team. And if I don't make this team, then what?
Yeah.
And like, God bless me with athletic ability. So I got on this team. I move out from home. I move into back into Calgary to go play college basketball. So back into the big center, urban center, playing basketball. I went from a very vanilla town of 2,500 people
Yeah.
to being the only, and I got to bring this up because it played an important part in my development, the only white guy on the basketball team.
Yep.
And and I was thrown into a culture that I wasn't familiar with, and it was fascinating to me. And I started to see other people's perspectives, lived experience, things that they had gone through, things that we had in common, and
Yeah.
then how we were, even though our experiences might have been quote unquote uncommon, the context was so different. And I learned how, in that moment, how to navigate conversations and interact with different people. And in my freshman year, my coach came to me at the end of my freshman year. He's like, "Hey, you're going your sophomore year next year. We want to make you captain of this team." And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, no. Yeah, like that doesn't roll like that. But my coach, his name was Steve, and then Dwayne, who was like the scariest human being I've ever met. Like, I just remember breaking Dwayne's glasses in practice one day, and he just grabbed me by the neck, and I thought like my life was over.
Good ones.
But they were great, and they came to me and they encouraged me to like, hey, we want you part of this, and we want you here for the long term, and this is a role that we are giving you. You're going to have to learn how to step into this. And it was that challenge that was really good for me. But here's where things went sideways. In 2002, I would have been 21 years old. My mom was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. I was living in Calgary. I was going to college. I was playing basketball. My middle brother, he's 3 years younger than me, was finishing his senior year of high school. My youngest brother, 6 years younger than me, he was in grade 9. And my mom got diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which is a bone marrow cancer, uncurable. And the way they found it is she went into renal failure. Her kidneys failed. They had to airlift her to a hospital because they were still living in Three Hills, a small town. They had to airlift her to a hospital. They had no idea what was going on, biopsies, all this. And I remember when it was July 7th of 2002. And my dad walked into the place I was renting with a bunch of guys off my team. And he says, like, hey, guys, can we have some privacy? And they knew that we were going through some stuff as a family. And my dad, I was 21 years old. My dad never hugged me. I don't remember. Like I've seen pictures of like when I was a little boy that my dad was hugging me. But in my teenage years, I don't remember dad ever hugging me. I didn't really spend much time with him, although I know he loved me and he worked really hard and he never missed a game. But I'd never seen my dad cry or show emotion other than anger.
Mm-hmm.
And so when my dad stood in the living room there and he looked at me, and my dad's 6'1", so I'm bigger than my dad. And he's like, Cam, mom has cancer. And he started to cry and he grabbed me and he gave me a big hug. And I was like, oh, like this is serious. Like if dad's here, this is serious. And then I thought about my brothers. And so the next year, I was actually recruited to go play for another school. It's kind of like a step up, hey, more high profile program. They wanted me to come play. I was excited about that. I was on my way there, and then something hit me, and it was just like, I can't go. I can't get further away from my family. I can't get further away from my brothers. And so I turned it down, and I finished out my eligibility in Calgary, which was hindsight the right decision. But when you finish out your eligibility and you still have, at that point in time, I had picked a direction. You know, Matt and you and I had this in common. We were educators. I'd picked a direction of where I was going and what I wanted to do. I still had time left to do that. Like I still had 2 years left because I had changed from a Bachelor of Science and a pre-med designation to wanting to be a teacher.
Yeah.
And so I had 2 more years. And so I finished my first degree, a 4-year degree, and then I transferred. But I wasn't playing ball anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
immediately I was that 12-year-old boy who couldn't make any friends. And I was in a new college, a new university here in Canada, much bigger campus, more high profile. And people there knew who I was because I'd played for a rival school um, as Cam, like the basketball guy. I was always Cam, the fit guy, basketball guy, but I wasn't a basketball player anymore. And I wasn't on the team. And so I didn't know who I was. And I couldn't make friends because I had no skills because I had been gifted this opportunity to be thrown into a group of 14 guys every fall.
Mm.
And I struggled. I struggled with like who I was as an individual, and then I just played into the expectations of others. And this was me in my 20s, Matt. This was me trying to
Yep.
impress and belong just for others. So I was always Cam, the fit guy. So I'm like, that's it. I'm going to be the fit guy. Like I'm going to be 6'5", 235, 240, and just chiseled.
Yep.
And I did everything I could to do that. Never got to 240, got about 235. Now I never put anything illegal into my body, just so I want to preface that
Yeah.
because I was always very cautious. My mom was going through chemotherapy and a stem
Right.
cell transplant. So health was very important to me. But I did pretty much starve myself and eat nothing but chicken, carrots, and rice for 2 years,
Yeah.
and it was super uncomfortable, like physically uncomfortable. I was miserable. I had met my now wife, girlfriend at the time, and she was playing ball. She was off to playing like semi-pro ball in the summers in Europe, and she was doing all this cool stuff. And that even hurt a little bit because I could see that she was doing great in the sport that we both loved. I wasn't the basketball player anymore. And so I struggled, man. And I struggled with my health. I struggled with my relationship with food, body image, all of it, and being confident. And so then as a young man who 6'5", muscular, athletic, you get certain attention even when you're not on the team. As I
Mm.
started to make some bad life choices, right? So I went down that path while my mom went through chemotherapy and a stem cell transplant, just a hindsight thing. When we found out mom had cancer, she was given 6 to 8 months. She was in full dialysis. She had a PICC line put in. She was 41 years old. And we're like, what's going to happen to our family when mom dies in 6 months? I'll let you know that was in 2002. My mom passed away in 2015. And
Wow.
so amazing. Like she
Yeah.
got to see marriages and grandkids and all
Yes.
types of stuff. Right. And so, but that really impacted my development as a young man.
So good, man. So you guys, the dichotomy that's playing out here in this story too, right? You've got the benefit of connecting through sport and the benefit of these forced experiences. You mentioned, it connects you to a culture. I understand. I grew up in the Bay Area of California, and I
Yeah.
have, we grew up in a very interesting town where the first friend of mine that I had that went to prison was when we were in eighth grade, and he murdered someone,
Mm,
right? And I'm not saying that's a good thing. It's obviously not a good thing, but I'm saying I
yep.
had friends from that side of the track, so to speak,
Yep.
all different ethnicities. I played sports with guys who, that was the culture, that was the background. I had
Mhm.
guys that were, coming from these multimillionaire families. We were just a lower middle class. But I look back at that and go, man, okay, now I can relate to so many people because I've got shared experiences with so many. There's so much value in that, right? And you
Right.
saw that value. But then there's also the polarization of, cool, when the force connection gets pulled away, at some point, you've got to wrestle with, who am I? Who is this guy in the mirror?
Yeah.
And if I've got the thing that I've always connected myself to, and the thing is not me, it is this thing, and
Yep.
that's no longer there, where do I fit everywhere else? Right? Like the polarization of those, because every young man on here, everybody listening to this is going to face both of those scenarios,
Absolutely.
both of those. And it's not one or the other. And it's both. And you want to do well in both because it's gonna be such a struggle. So that identity piece for you, how did you regain that? How did you figure out who Cam was in the midst of dealing with mom, dealing with the physical side, seeing the girlfriend that is now like, and it's like the
Mm.
reminder that you're no longer a part of that. Like that's hard, man. That's hard up
Yeah.
here. How did you get back to that piece and figure out who Cam is?
I'm still working on that, Matt.
Yeah,
I'm so,
brother.
but
That's
like, honestly,
but that's the
uh,
thing, right?
yeah, I'm honestly still working on that. But in that period of time, it was like my health, even though I looked great, was started to deteriorate. And it was Kim, my wife, not at the time girlfriend, like, and even with that, I want to talk about this too.
Yeah.
I started dating Kim in 2003. We didn't get married to 2011. It wasn't because I didn't love her, it's because I was scared shitless that
Yep.
what this meant and this commitment to it.
Yep.
And that was unfair to her. But she stuck next to me the entire time. And this was a me thing, not ready to settle, being scared of commitment because I didn't know who I was. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was through this whole process that Kim said, like, you're not well.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember her sitting there saying, you're not well. You need someone to help you. And I was like, brush it off, 30-year-old guy, like whatever. And then I had to drop something off. My parents moved to Calgary, so a couple hours away. I had to drop something off for my dad, a project we were working on. And my mom just grabbed me out of nowhere. She was working in the garden and she grabbed me. She's like, I was thinking about it. If you're not going to marry this girl, you got to let her go. You're being, and then mom lit me up because that's what
Yeah,
moms are supposed to do too.
that's right.
And I remember that 2 hour drive home and being like, what am I doing? Like, who am I? This is not who's consistent with my character. And I think about, this integrity triangle that I tell my kids about and I share with others, this idea of like your character, your reputation, and those actions that you take. And if they're not all in alignment, you're not living with integrity. And my character was like my values, my beliefs, and I had that here, but my actions weren't in alignment with that. And the reputation I was starting to build with my community wasn't in alignment with that. So I had some work to do. But what shifted it was when Kim said, you're not well, you need to do something. And I got a mentor. And I found a mentor by chance. Um, Kim was on her mat leave after our first kid in 2000 and well, Maya was born 2012. In
Mm.
2013, we went to a health conference and I met this guy really quickly and then we left. And his name was Mark McDonald. So we left and I was in this point where I'll just give a brief overview of how this happened. Mine was born, and I was always that fit guy, starving myself to get a desired look. And when Maya was born, I put on like 28 pounds in 6 months and not the good way.
Yep.
And people were like, oh, yeah, Cam's just bulking. Although I had never bulked in my entire life, but and it was really bad for me mentally. And I went to this real low and I went back to the practices I did before to lose the weight and get shredded,
Yeah.
which it worked, but it took a long time. Well,
Yeah.
2014, my son is born. And then in the 6 to 8 months after he was born, more weight. It was like 32 pounds. I remember sitting in the hospital after he was born on a super uncomfortable little brown chair, getting a call offering me a position as an assistant principal of an elementary school. I was in the middle of my master's degree, which is it's a 4 year program squished into 2 years. I had a 2 year old at home, a newborn across the room, sitting on the sand. I'm like, oh, yeah, that sounds good. I'll take that. Worst decision of my life. And that next year was like chaos for me. And it was in 2015 that I went to Vegas with my wife for a health conference. She was on her mat leave, and my wife's always been this like super go-getter. So she started this thing called K-Fit Mummy. She was helping moms with outdoor boot camps who are on their mat leave, and she's so like happy all the time. And sometimes it's just like, how do you do this? But I was like, I'm coming. I'll come with you. And at the end of the conference, the keynote speaker was this smart guy. He's meeting all these people in line. I just walk up. I'm like, hey, my name's Cam. This is my wife, Kim. She has K-Fit Mummy. We're from Calgary, Alberta. And he's like, you're Kim, K-Fit Mummy. I was like, how does this happen? And it's like conversations and connections from mentors that we had had and marriage mentors. Somehow there was a connection. And Mark looked at me, and I remember this, and he just like, that like dad pat on the side of your arm, which is like that hard one that you just know.
Yeah.
And he just like, and he's smaller than me, but
Yeah.
I, in that moment, felt small. He's like, listen, we're going to get you on track because this isn't you. So we're going to connect. I'm going to connect with you by June. We're going to do something. And he mentored me and he coached me on how to like eat healthy, work out, be a dad and be active and fit. And it worked. And my mood improved. My relationship with my wife and my kids improved. And that's when, Matt, I started to fight the dad bod because I was like, I got to share this with other guys. And then what that did, it started me on this trajectory of now I felt like I had something to bring again.
Yeah.
And I discovered who I was. I was someone who uses a lens of empathy and compassion and grace, but also loves to make people feel uncomfortable so that they can grow through discomfort.
Yes,
And
sir.
that's kind of my value. Yeah.
So rad. And the beauty of that. So again, somebody is speaking in because you mentioned this earlier too. Coaches speaking in, going, look, I see where you're going. I see what's going on in your life here. I got something else for you. You don't have to go get out on the rigs. I see some of the decisions, right? You've got this other path.
Yeah.
You're a grown man and another man going, hey, by the way, this isn't you, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you that fatherly boom, like you've got
Yeah.
to go a different route. So having that value, we talk about climbing the apogee of the mountain and the fact that as you're doing that, you've got men that are ahead of you and like you've got to reach up because they're the ones pulling you up. These are the guys that are speaking into you going, look, man, I've walked it
Yep.
before, but simultaneously, you need to have a hand back here because there's people that haven't gotten to where you are yet, right? So this is the
Right.
whole journey the whole time is I'm looking up here and I'm looking down here and pulling somebody up behind me. And the beauty is we always think it's more, I need more of this. I need more of this. I need more hands reaching up. I need more purpose and identity starts to come when you start to reach back and go like this,
Absolutely.
right?
But it's not easy, right?
And
It's
not at
not easy
all.
because when you get to that point on the mountain, I climb mountains. I love doing that.
Yeah,
Usually at that point, there's some scree, that loose rock that kind of
yeah,
slides when you're on
yeah,
it. And so when you reach up and somebody's trying to help you, you're still
yeah.
getting pounded in the face with
That's
really
right.
uncomfortable stuff.
Yes, you
And you
are.
still need to be able to have the strength to turn around and help somebody else and not worry about the stuff hitting you in the face. And it's this turning point where you're like, boom, this is me. Like, this is me asking for help and guidance. And this is me being a leader.
Yes,
And when you
sir.
can find that in between and you're comfortable in that discomfort, man, that's life changing.
That's where it is, man. That's where purpose is. You start building out this particular program. You're also still working in education. And can
Yeah.
you, right? And can you give us a little bit of insight into how that's continued to progress? So, because you are doing the yes and you are living, which man, I feel it. I relate to it. It's literally what I've been doing for, for a long time now too. It's building things on the education side and building things to pour into this, tribe and lead. Can you take us a
Mm.
little bit through that journey of doing both here simultaneously?
Yeah. So I started my career when I was teaching math and science. So I
Yep.
taught math and science, and I did that for 5.5 years. And by year three, it
Mm.
was like, I'm over it. Like, come
Yep.
on, but there's only
Yep.
so much math and science a guy
Yep.
who hates math and science can teach.
Totally.
So like that's where I was at. And it was middle school math and science. So grade 7, grade 8. So kids who were like come in at 12, leave at 14 type thing.
Yep.
And I had an opportunity I was presented with an opportunity to move into special education, to
Yeah.
work with students with significant disabilities. And I was like, there's no man, not one man in our entire city who's doing that work. And I saw that as a bit of a challenge. I've always been a guy who likes a challenge, but also a bit intimidating. Like, what can I bring to this? Who am I in this? But I had about an hour and a half to make my decision. Called my wife, said, I'm going to make a change. She's like, you're going to what? So I did. Well, I spent the next 9 years of my career connected to special education somehow. So a couple of years in that middle school that I started my career in, that elementary school where I was the assistant principal, where I had accepted on in the hospital room. I was only there for a year. It was a terrible year. Elementary is not my jam, too many sticky kids. And which I love my kids because, sticky
100%.
hands are cool when they're your son's sticky hands. But when then I moved to a high school and I've spent the last 9 years. And actually, for those on here, full transparency, I am a vice principal of a high school right now.
That's right.
And we can talk about some disappointment because I had a hard moment this morning. We can talk about that later. But so I'm a vice principal of a high school right now. And I moved into that and I love that age because I think in this environment where the system, Matt, you and I have talked about this idea, this conveyor belt education system where people go on and, you would call me a reformer because I'm in it and I'm just trying to blow it up. I'm a disruptor. Actually, our superintendent saw me the other day at a meeting and I was asking questions. I'm like, what about this? What about this? And people thought I was throwing grenades in the conversation, but he came by. He's like, Cam, I like you because you're a shit disturber. I'm like, well, somebody has to be.
That's right.
Like, someone has to be. So here I am in this high school where it's this high school about 15, almost 1,600 kids and grades 9, 10, 11, 12. And so that's where I work every day. And I go there for the youth in that building
Mm.
because my job is to show up there every day and grace and compassion and empathy, but discomfort.
Mm.
And from the moment they get off the bus and I'm like, good morning, good morning. Hey, how's your dad doing? How's your sister doing? Like, how was work? I know you're in grade 11, but you're leaving here really quick at the end of the day because you got to work to pay the rent because we have so many kids who are more or less homeless and they're couch surfing, they're doing things. And those are the kids I'm drawn to, these kids who don't have connections in their lives.
Mm.
A lot of the kids who I've not mentored, but started groups with. I think I told you, Matt, we started like a drop shipping group and an
Yeah, man.
entrepreneurial group and an outdoor. We call them wild yotes because coyotes is our mascot. And so we look at the wild yotes. We head out to the mountains and we climb and we ski and we do all types of stuff. Like that's the important piece of this journey for kids who are kids, young men and women who are between the ages of, I think, like 15 to 18, 14 to 18. It's not sitting in that stupid desk in a classroom for 8 hours a day. I shouldn't say that because I'm a vice principal of a place that puts kids in stupid desks 7, 6 hours a day. But that's that's what I believe. That's how I feel. And so that's where I'm at. I'm actually today, I just took a day off to be here with you. And this is probably the best day of my week so far. So it's good.
So rad. Oh, so rad. And man, and I know I've said it a million times. I've said it on the show. I've said it to, you guys in general. Um, I very much, not only am I on the side of reformers like you, dude, I am like, how can I support? And that's I operate that way, and I want to make sure because I've done a bad job in the past of mixing my messages versus being very, very clear. I am very much on the revolution side of let's create something different, but I am in such support of the fact that we need reformers like you who are that this is not a system that's going to go away. It's not going away. I understand that. We're
Yeah.
going to do our side to show something different that I'm hoping impacts that way, right? Like, of course, because I want to do right by all human beings. We need amazing humans who are operating here and being the best people that these young people see, right? And so I know, like, having you, like, I wish every school had a camp. I would literally sleep better. Every school has a Cam Hall in it. I would sleep better because it's a need, man. And I'm just so on that side, and I have so much dang respect for that, brother. So truly, man, I am extraordinarily grateful. And I got to connect. Went out and did a show in New York last week or the week before. They all run together, but I was out in New York and sitting down with this college professor. He's a professor of education and he talks education policy. And
Mm.
we were there to debate on this big platform. But really, man, it became more of we actually agree on 85, 90% of things. There's a handful of things we kind of disagree about, but here's where we both come together. Man, we want to do right by the young people, right? I tell you what, if we can all start there, we're gonna be okay anyways.
Yeah.
Like that's it.
Yeah.
And I know that's how you focus and what you do, man. So I'm so dang grateful. You are in a couple of really important spaces. You are in the space of educating our youth. You are in the space of leading men who are in charge of leading their families. you're in these, how do you feel about where culture is going in both of those areas? There is more public intentionality around men helping other men to be better men. There is some more public intentionality there that, I don't remember seeing. Obviously, we didn't have social media growing up. We didn't have these different ways to connect, through the internet. We didn't have all this, but I don't remember it happening necessarily at a local level a whole lot either. So how do you feel about where we're moving there? Do you feel like there's anything where we're, pendulums are swinging too far in any direction on the men's side? And then how are you feeling in the education sphere, the education space, and what's going on? And we can take that as anywhere you want to go, schools versus alternative schools versus things that are going on at Columbia University versus just, all of this kind of stuff in general. How are you feeling about, are you optimistic about both of those and anything that you're like, but I worry about this?
I love seeing the stuff with men, men banding together, men
Yeah.
seeking guidance, men looking for mentorship. I don't know if that's just the algorithm because it feeds it to me because that's what I'm into.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many men are actually seeing it, but I
Mm,
love seeing that there's more and more men out there who are creating things, who are writing books, who have podcasts, who are just trying to get messages out to connect with other men. Because we know statistics have shown, doesn't matter if you live in Canada or the United States or anywhere else in the world, men are dying in isolation.
yes,
And I
sir.
think it's important to surround guys with support. And so I love where that direction is going. I
Mm,
think there can be times where a guy will put himself on a pedestal to
mm,
say, follow what I do because I know better. And I'm very cautious of guys who I see who are spreading messages because they know better, because
mm.
none of us know better. You-
Man.
So I think I'm drawn to people, Matt, like you, like other guys in this space who are open, who have a growth mentality, a growth mindset, who are just committed to leading strong men and strong families, but actually making an impact through what we do,
Mm,
not just putting it as a pedestal to give myself a platform. So I like what I'm seeing in that sphere.
yeah.
When it comes to education, here's what I see. I see a system that's the same as when I went to school and my dad went to school and everything, but what I'm seeing is kids are different. And I don't and I know there's young guys on here, I know there's older guys on here, but here's what I can tell from my lived experience and everyday interacting with youth, that we don't have to be as worried about our youth as we are right now. Like I see this generation of young men who I interact with in our school who are ready to become leaders. They just need someone to push them in the right direction. I
Mm,
see them pushing back on some things that are happening right now in our culture, which they're getting flack for. And the only reason they're getting flack for pushing back is because they're doing it in a way that a 16 or 15-year-old would do it. And they
mhm,
just need some mentorship and saying, I know what you're thinking. I can see what you believe and you value, but
mm,
here's what people are saying. So like let's work through this because I think your message is powerful. You're going to have influence, but let's doing it in a way that influence takes care and thought and reflection. And I think right now you're not reflecting on what you're doing. So I'm not as worried about our youth. What I am worried about, however, is that the draw of always being connected online, always doing something over a screen, even in my groups and Matt in
yeah.
your group, like this is amazing, but how much more impactful would it be if we were in person? Like we know those in-person connections are really important. So helping young men and women find mentorship in-person connections that are healthy, meaningful, and where they bring something. And so that's what we're working on right now in our environment. When it comes to the system of education, it's like you said it, Matt. The cookie cutter mold is not going to change,
Yeah.
but site based, I see lots of change.
Yes, sir.
And I just have to speak a little to my context because our context here, like education systems here are run differently. Like every city has its individual school boards, but we're all like provincial run curriculum that was
Right.
created by educators. Like I got to sit as a vice principal on the curriculum development committee for our entire province. And so that, and a lot of people who have like my type of mindset sit on that and say this is important and this isn't, so we're not regurgitating facts and we're not just downloading what people are telling us. I'm
Yeah.
not sitting in a social studies or histories classroom where we're talking about political agendas and I'm not just downloading it, but I'm thinking critically about it.
Good.
And I think that's a big thing in our environment we're pushing right now. So I like where we're headed. I can speak to our site, but I know that even across the city, there's another high school that's a little bit larger than ours where the leadership in that school might think a little bit differently. So, yeah,
Really
that's
good.
why I'm drawn to continue to do the work, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah, 100%. You can see where positive impact is actually taking place and where things are
Yeah.
moving forward. No, I appreciate that so much, man. On both sides of that, I'm right there with you. If anybody tells you they know everything, that's run far away. If anybody tells you
Yeah.
their answer is the panacea to anything else, run far away.
Yeah.
It's not true. And I think again, talking about those polarities, for all of you guys listening, like the polarity of I know everything, incorrect. I know
Mhm.
nothing. I'm internally broken. Let's all just be broken together. Also
No.
incorrect,
Right.
right? It is not either of those things. Everybody's got something to offer. Everybody has some ideas. Be brave enough to change your mind in that. Connect with others who have better ideas in a better space. Like let's work together so that we're not, swung back and forth. Could not agree
Mhm.
more on that. And I love what you said around the in person too. Everything we're doing is we launch these campuses and these locations. It is partially to become the hub for everybody to get together. Ultimately, this will just help augment. This will just help, the fact that Jeremy is in Texas and I live in North Carolina, and we can't just go down the road and hang out. Otherwise, we
Yeah.
would. Great.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and be able to connect here. But we do need those in-person locations. So powerful, so different, man. We need it. Oh, really, really good. So as we start to wind this up, before we tell everybody where to find you and everything,
Hmm.
what do the next few years look like for Cam? According to, hey, if Cam can do it and nothing else gets crazy on the outside, right? Like this is what I would love to happen over these next few years for myself, my business, my family, my school. Like, what does that look like for you?
This is fresh for me right now
Yeah.
because over the last 2 hours before this call, I've been sitting on my couch and my wife's at work. She works at the hospital, and I'm just like, can you believe this happened this morning? So I'm going to give you insight.
Yeah.
The principal of our school retired.
Yeah.
Is done at the end of this year. There's also another principal who got, let's say, gently moved from his position in another high school. So there's two postings. I applied for both of those last week. I got interviewed for them, and I didn't get the principal position in our school. And my brain was like, maybe this is the next 3 to 5 years. My kids might come through here. This is going to be what I want to do. And when I got called on Wednesday, and here's how handling disappointment can go two ways. When I when I got called on Wednesday by our associate superintendent, said, "Hey, you interviewed amazing. We love what you do, but we've decided to go with another applicant." There was a side of me that was disappointed, but I felt this wave of relief wash over me. And I was like, why? Like I stopped in that moment. I'm like, why do I feel this way?
Yeah.
And it's because truthfully, I know like I've been there for 9 years. Our building will benefit from having some fresh eyes and a new leader. I'm still going to be there. This is these things. So that's okay. And I came home and had a conversation with my wife and I said, moving forward now, like, what do I do? I haven't heard about this other principal position, but do I really want to do this? My kids are like 9, going to be 10 and 12. That's a lot to take on. And I'm passionate about helping men and leading men. So, I got my Fight the Dad Bod coaching program for guys. I got the Dads Making a Difference stuff. And I'm just like, that's calling me as well. And I can't do it all.
Yeah.
And I think on Wednesday, what I realized is that sense of relief was both because I care for that space and maybe I wasn't the right person. I trust that process. But I think one door always closes because another one is going to open. And I'm excited to see what that door is going to be. But for me, if I could do it all, man, I would love to lead a learning community that was centered on growth, where kids knew their why, aim for growth, and take ownership over their journey. And I would also love to lead men through the same thing, where guys knew their why, where they aimed for growth, and they took ownership over their own journey. And if I can find something, and I'm working on it right now, that's something where that is parallel and that is continuous, and we can involve dads in education and families and community in education, that's
Mm,
what I want to do, man.
brother, I would argue that you are doing it as we speak. I
Mhm.
would argue that you are in the process of building that very thing as you speak. I really would, man. You are a leader in both of those spaces right now, man. So that's
Appreciate it.
just, oh, so good. So this will go out to everybody on the podcast platforms too, and I want to
Cool.
make sure people know where they can find you, where they can connect with you. So where would you have them go? And then
It's
so
good.
that's one, and then the final question too is how do we, as an organization here with Apogee, how do we really support you best? Those are the final two questions for you.
Good questions. You can find me. So social media stuff, there's two handles where I locate myself. The first is at Fight the Dad Bod. That's probably the one. If guys are like thinking health, family, living fit, active lifestyles, that's kind of where to go. At Dad's Making a Difference is really the center for the podcast and the work that I'm doing there. And so either one of those works. Facebook, Cameron Hall, you'll find me. It's just me. It's my face. So you'll see me there. That's another place to connect to.
I love it.
Uh, the second part of your question, I appreciate you saying so, and asking how you can help. And right now, I think this helps me. I think any opportunity, in this opportunity, I have to even question what I'm saying as I'm going and to get my thoughts out of my head and into words and see the reactions of the faces on the screen is extremely helpful. So I appreciate this opportunity. And I would just love to connect. I would love to connect more with you guys, your community,
Yeah.
and to learn more about what you're doing.
Well, let's keep doing it, man. Let's keep the conversations rolling. We have you come in with just the dads at some point too, and just the man, and we can do
Cool.
this, do this again and talk through and just go. And we are here. Consider us a friend, supporter, resource, whatever that looks like. And obviously, you have that in me, but I'm speaking for the whole tribe too. You've got all of us at your back, brother.
Well, my friend, I hope you enjoyed that conversation on the Dad's Making a Difference podcast. Like I said before, I was honored to be on Matt's podcast. If you want to hear the full episode, we cut out about half an hour of it for this episode here. But if you want to hear the full episode where I get to do a Q&A with Matt's group, some young men, some old men, not so young men, get to ask me some questions. I get to respond from my heart, from my experience, and really off the cuff, just based on what I'm called to do. And if you want to get that full episode, go to Matt's podcast. It's called The Essential 11, and it's back on the May 12th episode. It's called Find Purpose and Navigate Life's Challenges, Building Character, Integrity, and Identity Through Action. And go there, get about 35 minutes in. You'll get the half hour of Q&A. Some young guys asked me a couple of questions, which I just love. That's close to my heart, given my world that I work in. And then some guys around my age asked me some questions, and that's close to my heart. Men like you, who I want to be able to speak into and help you change your life. So hope you appreciate this. If this episode was powerful for you, beneficial, or valuable to you, please like, share, take a guy in this, share it with a guy, say, hey, you got to listen to this podcast. We want to be in the ears of more men, changing more lives and helping you become a dad, making a difference. Until next week, my friend, we'll see you. Take care. Be a difference maker. Appreciate you.